We are live. So
Howdy.
we're howdy. So we're kind of coming into this, at least I am. I'm coming into this conversation a little bit naked. So I was recommended to have a chat with you from Carson of a
Yeah.
reasonable vegan. Um,
hmm
and so I did watch your conversation with him, um, where you talked about how humans aren't uh, herbivores.
Yeah.
Um, Which, I mean, I think I would agree with you. I think humans are probably omnivores. Um,
I could see a strong argument for humans eating a lot less meat in their diets. We do have a very heavily meat focused diet, like especially in Eurocentric places. It's just the idea that humans aren't meant to eat meat is something that I've always had a strange issue with.
yeah, I don't think like a lot of vegans try and claim that meat is like a super unhealthy thing. I don't think it's that. There are certainly unhealthy aspects of meat, but that's kind of true about really
Sure.
any food. And there's you know
Absolutely.
healthier meats and less healthy meats, right? A hot dog is a lot gonna
hmm
is gonna be a lot less healthy than like a piece of salmon or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
The
but
best meats, as far as I'm aware, are like lean meats, chicken, pork, fish, things like that. Beef can be bad for you, things like that. But yeah.
yeah, and this is kind of why I tend to separate the whole health aspect um, of the conversation from the like ethics of it.
Okay.
Because I don't care so much about like what we were like what we naturally eat, more so um, what's the most ethical
The
thing to
ethical
do.
framework behind
Yeah.
the dietary needs and things like that. So there is one thing that I will acknowledge right off the bat, and it's that I'm by nature I love meat, and that kind of makes me a hypocrite morally because veganism is, I would say, quite near objectively the most moral system by which you could really live, at least in a dietary sense, because it's the only way to make sure you're not killing something that's got like a consciousness and things like that. It's just a matter of preference for me. So that I can agree to that pretty easily.
Yeah, interesting. I would like to eventually kind of press you on that a little bit. Um, yeah, well, actually, why don't we yeah, just get kind of right into it.
Sure.
So I like to acknowledge first off that like we all have preferences that we that cause some sort of suffering in the world, right? Like
There, a quote comes to my mind that you hear tossed around online a lot is that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. Everybody has unethical things that they consume in their day to day life, depending on how you break it
yeah, exactly. In my position, I would just put buying animal products far enough above that like the suffering causing threshold that it seems to be um it causes for me it causes extreme amounts of suffering for sort of minute amounts of pleasure. um
down.
yeah, but so I would just ask you um are you familiar with the name the trait argument?
I probably am, but refresh me.
Gotcha. So I would assume if there was some farm, or if we were farming humans, right? I would imagine you would not be okay with buying like human meat or human
Yeah,
milk or
I would have an issue buying, Soylent Green. Yeah.
yeah, okay. But you don't have an issue with buying animal products in so much that you actually purchase them from the store.
Yeah,
So then,
absolutely.
yeah, so then what would be true um, of a pig or a cow, um, that if true of a human and that on the human farm would make it justified to buy products from the human farm?
Hmm. That is actually a pretty good question. Hmm. I'm not sure that I could think of anything that you could use to really justify it in the case of humanity, but that could just be like a special bias where like, we hold humans in a different regard than we hold animals in. That's why a lot of people don't think that there should be like animal rights. I think there should, but that's just an example. Um, hmm. I don't know that there really would be a way to like put some sort of trait onto people that would allow for the farming of people. Not that that's something I'd have to think of for quite some time before I might be able to conjure up an argument in the positive.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, give it a thought. I can um throw out some examples maybe. So oftentimes
Sure.
people will give the example of intelligence. Um, or there's something about intelligence. So like people. So
People
I asked,
underestimate the intelligence of farm animals. Cows and pigs are wildly intelligent creatures.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Something that a lot of people will name is like the type of intelligence, right? So pigs are very intelligent, right? They're as intelligent as children essentially. Um, but there's a
Hmm.
difference with children where they actually have some sort of ability to um, morally reason or think about abstract things. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
so a lot
think
of
a
people,
large part of the reason that people will think of the intelligence of animals on a different level than ours or on a lower level is like just the basic idea of communication, right? Like
yeah,
dolphins. Dolphins have such a complex language that we can't understand it. We still haven't been able to crack the code, but people still think that dolphins aren't intelligent because they don't build buildings or speak the way we do. It's like an internal bias just based against that. People can have the same kind of biases against other languages. It's I think that's kind of at the crux of why people would demean the intelligence of animals because they have different pressures and needs. They wouldn't build buildings, they wouldn't need to. They don't communicate the same way we do because they didn't need to evolve a speech center like we did. But that's just my thinking on it as it stands. I'm a little rusty,
no, I mean
so
it makes sense. The ability to like have a conversation with something or like to understand the conversation. It reminds me of how like in the trolley problem, um, right where you have five people on a track. The train's going towards the five people. You
mhm.
can pull the lever and kill one person, saving net four lives. Most
Yeah.
people will pull the lever, right? But then if you go towards like the next step where it's not a lever and you're actually pushing the person into the train, um, a lot more people will not do
Yeah,
that. The ones
the
that
way they change that is there's an enormously fat man in front of you, and if you shove him, it'll stop the train, but it'll kill that man. Right? That's
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
one you're referring to. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. And a lot of people won't push the fat man, and the ones
Hmm.
that will often hesitate uh, before
Yeah.
they do it. So it's this idea of like the more separated you are from something, right? So the consequences of pulling the lever,
Hmm.
it's the exact same as pushing the fat man. It's the
It's
same exact
one
consequence.
way that I've heard that question posed because in the short time that I did have the chance to attend college, I sat in on a couple of philosophy courses because it's always interested me. And one of my friend's courses that I was sitting in on, his professor was talking about the trolley problem, how it's a really good way to suss out people's like vulnerability and accountability, but it doesn't really mean a lot. And the way he did that was he changed it from a lever or a push to like a stab or a gunshot. And it turns out that most people would rather shoot somebody than stick them. And the reason for that is because you feel more attached when you do that. It's like it's the moral quandary changes depending on the variables. But that's I thought that was really interesting when he put it that way because like when it's a lever or a shove, that's one thing. But it was like how did he put it? It was like there's a person on the tracks. You have to kill them to get them on the tracks, but you can't push them. How would you do it? Or it was you could shoot this person, it would take them out quickly, they would fall and they would feel no pain, or you could stab them. And a lot of people would take the shoot because it seems like it's the easier way, but it also has a level of detachment with it because at the end of the day, it's a lot easier. That the trolley problem's a fun one to investigate. I like
I love the trolley problem.
that.
Yeah, and you can do all sorts of different. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I guess going back to the whole like that may be a reason why people find it easier to exploit animals. There's a separation of our ability to conversate with them.
That I think that like I don't have any data specifically on that, but that to my mind that seems to me to be the ultimate thing that generally seems to make people think that animals are so much further down than people are. Is just communication at the end of the day. But as we start to understand how animals communicate with one another, it kind of makes it harder and harder to detach people from animals because they all have their own complex ways to communicate. It's like wolves when they howl. They don't just howl for no reason. There's multiple reasons they would, and one of those reasons is mourning. And when people found that out, it changed a lot of perspectives on wolves because people didn't realize that wolves had that empathetic capability to mourn, to mourn the loss of just somebody from their pack. Right? It made people see more of themselves in those animals, and now people see wolves as more regal creatures than they used to. Communication, at least to my mind, that's the crux. There are other things like, oh, they wallow in the dirt, but that's just how they keep cool, like stuff like that. Like people
Gotcha.
think pigs are dirty animals because they live in the mud. They're actually extremely clean creatures. They just stay in the mud because it's the only way to cool off in the sun.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's all sorts of people with pet pigs, and they seem to be pretty
Oh
clean.
yeah, I had a friend who had one.
Yeah.
My slide wasn't away.
I'll take it out after I'm done.
The pan's right there.
No, I know I'm doing a thing. My grandma came in the garage.
Oh, very, very good. So it seems like you actually largely agree with like the vegan message.
I
Yet
do.
you,
My issue was more often with the very radical side of like. Okay, you remember in like 2016 there was a big rash of these like anti-SJW channels. You remember that?
yeah,
Where like they would take like feminists and like people. They would always take the most radical versions of people and then put them on display like they represented people.
yeah, sure, yep,
That stuff really took off when I was in like high school, when I was very impressionable. So I ended up really deep into that. So for a long time, I thought that veganism was, bringing chickens into chicken restaurants and trying to convince people that they shouldn't eat chicken because they're animals. Like for a long time, that influenced the way I thought about it. But over the past couple of years, I've changed a lot as a person. But over the past few months, for some reason, this topic is something that I've dwelled on, and it's something that I've kind of evolved my thinking on. I'm still not vegan. I still I've tried to go vegan. It's just not something that works for me, but I don't knock anybody who wants to do it.
interesting. Yeah, so I had sort of a similar story. I was very anti-vegan in high school as well. Yeah, I thought I was also very like libertarian in high school, and I thought vegans were these like
Did you read Ayn
libertarian.
Rand when you were in high school?
Oh, of course, yeah, Ayn Rand is
Yeah.
yeah.
Ayn Rand has made a lot of very cringy teenagers.
Yep. It seems
Oh,
like you
yeah.
either
My
become
grandma
like
had me read Atlas Shrugged when I was a kid, and I thought that book was something more than it really was. I know
yeah.
exactly how that is.
It seems like you either become like in high school, you either become like this hardcore like anarcho-capitalist libertarian, or you become some like communist,
There's some food ready.
and then your views tend to bottom out into something more like
See, I think a good
yeah,
portion of the reason for that is because of the education system, like the way you get taught about things, right? Like, I don't know where you're from specifically. I grew up in Florida and in Texas mostly. So in the South, they teach you weird things about history. Like one of the big examples is that Andrew Jackson was actually really good to his slaves because he didn't want to have them. George Washington's teeth were made of wood, and they actually weren't. They were made of slaves' teeth. You learn that, like, I was taught that the Black Panthers were a terrorist organization. Like I remember when I was in seventh grade in reading, or sixth grade, I was in reading class, and they showed us Animal Farm, and they told us that that story was proof of why communism can't work. When in reality, George Orwell was a communist, and it was supposed to be knocking Stalin. Like there's a lot of things in our education system that you don't learn, and you start to learn as you get older. So when you're a kid, you just take this faulty knowledge that you've been given about weird things in the world that you don't even have the ability to process, and you just run with it, right? Because some of the most easily digestible people on the internet are people who just lie for money. Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, people like that. Those are the kind of people that influenced me when I was younger. But as you get older, especially if you go to college, you start to learn that a lot of those things weren't true, and it changes the way you think about the world. That's what happened with me. I had a lot of really bad tendencies. I wasn't a great guy. But the girl I'm with now, she decided one day she kind of got tired of it, and she sat me down and she was like, I know you like to debate. I know you like to argue, so we're going to argue about this. And she convinced me of a lot of things and then helped me change my mind about a lot of that. But there was just a lot that I just assumed was right because it's what teachers do.
Yeah.
The way we're taught in school isn't to learn. We're taught to sit and be quiet. And that's part of the reason people have such a hard time learning.
Yeah, I could tell. So I was most of my schooling career I was homeschooled. Um, and I actually have
Homeschooled
big issues.
religious or just homeschooled?
I would say
Just out of
homeschooled
curiosity.
religious. Yeah, homeschooled religious.
Okay. I have some friends who were raised homeschooled evangelical.
Yeah. I'm from Utah, so I grew up Mormon. But I have big issues with homeschooling, but one of the benefits of
Yeah.
homeschooling is that it teaches you how to like learn on your own. It
Mhm.
teaches you to like learn
Yeah.
from curiosity, and yeah.
It's funny that you said Mormon. My the girl that I was talking about, she's asleep right now for work tonight. She's related to Brigham Young.
Yeah, a lot of
She's
them suck.
related to one of his wives. Yeah, yeah. There's like 45. He had what, 40 wives, something like that. He had a lot of them.
A lot of the
Yeah,
early.
she's directly related to Brigham Young, and she says that she takes pride in the fact that he wouldn't like her because she's mixed. That's just one of her little quirks. Then it's funny that that came up. It's
No, so
just like I said, I have ADHD. My brain will go if you don't, keep it in check.
oh, for sure. The funny thing about Brigham Young is that he was so racist that even church scholars, like official church scholars, just like outright say, yeah, he was racist. Like people aren't perfect.
Oh
Like, he
yeah,
was a- yeah,
even in the Mormons, like even the Mormons themselves are like, we have some problems, but he was like way out there.
yep. Yeah. So
Yeah.
as the
Are
vegan
you
American,
still Mormon or are you secular?
oh, I'm
Just
secular.
out of curiosity.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm an atheist.
Mormonism is such an interesting religion to me because of like the origin story of it and the things that they believe. It's always interested me quite a lot. We might talk about that one day. That might be interesting.
That could be fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something about Mormonism is that like so a lot of religions, most of the evidence against it just seems to be that like there's not a whole lot of evidence for their claims, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to Mormonism, there's not only is there not a lot of evidence for their claims, but there's like evidence like against their claims.
Yeah, like we found out that Native Americans came here from Asia specifically because of the claims of Mormonism. Because they said Native Americans came here from Israel or Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And a bunch of scientists were like, let's test that. And it turned out that they're Asian. Like there's whole things that we learned specifically because of the weird claims from Mormonism.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. But I guess as
Didn't he say that didn't they say that Jesus was born in like Mississippi or Kansas, something like that?
No, Jesus wasn't born in the U.S. But something they say is that the Garden of Eden was in the U.S. It was in Jackson County, Missouri. Yeah.
Jackson, yeah, that's what it was. Jackson County, Missouri.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just an aside, but that's always interested me. There's a lot of Mormons in Oklahoma. I ended up talking to a lot of them when I lived out there. I still have a copy of the Book of Mormon that they gave me one
Go do that.
day. We have a Kingdom Hall right up the road from us, so we have to deal with the JWs from time to time. But with Jehovah's Witnesses, I know a lot more about the things that go on with the Jehovah's Witnesses, so I have a lot more of an issue because they're directly next to me. So I found out that the easiest way to keep them from knocking on my door is to put up a sign that says apostates live here, and they will just avoid you like the plague. So now I don't have to worry about those people knocking from the Kingdom Hall.
Nice.
I always have a lot of sympathy for people who are Jehovah's Witnesses because of the way that the Watchtower Society takes advantage of them. I'm an anti-theist. My biggest problem is with the organization itself. It's not the religion. Like I respect people's beliefs. You know, believe whatever you want. Just I don't like that people are taken advantage of by the broader groups that control the religions themselves.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah, sure.
spread the gospel.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So as the vegan on the stream, I feel like I'm obligated to kind of bring the conversation back towards veganism.
Like I said, you have to wrangle my brain or it'll just go. Don't
Yeah,
be
I'm
afraid to
kind of
tell me I need to come back around.
I'm kind of the same way sometimes. But yeah, so something I wanted to mention. So
I'm unmedicated. That's why it's hard to keep me on. Just if I'm veering
gotcha.
too far off course, just drag me back. I'm fine with it.
Oh, you're all good. You're all good. So it sounds like you like kind of largely agree with like the ethics of veganism, but you have this sort of emotional attachment towards animal products.
Essentially, I think it's like a cultural attachment to it because part of the reason that I'm okay with people eating meat, even though I know and acknowledge that it's not quite moral, is because I know that meat can have a very strong cultural significance for a lot of cultures. Like for me, like I grew up, you know, in the South. There's a lot of like people don't realize it until they dig into it, but a lot of Southern culture is meat. Like a lot of it. Like in Texas, if you don't like brisket, people don't like you. Like it's strange how that pans out. So I think that that's a big part of what influences my ideas about like eating meat, and part of the reason that I still do is just cultural significance. And like I said, I tried to be vegan for a little while. It just wasn't for me. I might, you know, nowadays there's better alternatives for vegan food than there was before, so it might be possible. I might try it at some point in the future, but for now, I stick to what I stick to.
Yeah, I definitely understand the social aspect of it. It's like I think one of the main reasons people don't go vegan is just because they don't want to be the vegan at Thanksgiving. Um,
Yeah, the one who
I
wants to eat the tofurkey. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I have when I go to Thanksgiving with my big extended family, and I have my tofurkey, and like every 5 seconds, someone's making fun of me. Why do you have tofurkey? Why don't you? Yeah, and it's to the point now where I actually have decided I actually don't go to Thanksgiving anymore. I'll maybe get some friends together,
Mhm.
and have a vegan
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, right? And
There
so
is do you know the phrase blood is thicker than water? You've heard that
mm,
before?
mm,
That's a surprise.
yeah, I
So,
haven't.
blood is thicker than water is a phrase you'll hear tossed around by family a lot. And it's like, well, you should stick by your family because blood is thicker than water. But the actual full phrase is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Sometimes your friends will be better to you than your family. So if you get picked on by your family at events, have events with your friends. Whatever makes you happy makes you happy. Nothing should make you feel bad about
Sweet. But yeah. So that's one aspect. So that's something like I'm gonna acknowledge is that the social aspect of going vegan is actually one of the biggest reasons people don't go vegan. So I understand
that.
the issues with it. The other thing is that before I went vegan, I was a heavy meat eater. Um,
Hmm.
in fact, I worked for years. I worked at Chick-fil-A, and so yeah, chicken, pizza, pepperoni, and I absolutely loved In-N-Out Burger.
Oh, In-N-Out's great.
Yeah, I loved In-N-Out Burger. Double double animal style with a Neapolitan shake. That was my go-to.
Oh, yeah, that's a fucking winning combo there.
Yeah,
I like a 4
and
by 4 myself.
and that was like one of the main reasons. A double double from In-N-Out was one of the main reasons I didn't go vegan. So I was convinced of the moral argument for a good maybe up to maybe even a good year. At the very least, maybe 6 months or so. I was convinced of the
Yeah.
argument. But so I actually went on Facebook and I kept asking all my friends like, "Hey, what's the best argument against veganism? Because I really like In-N-Out." And I couldn't get it like an argument that I agreed with. So I sort of had to I had to sort of become vegan to align with my like, so I wouldn't be like
Your
living
morals.
the life, yeah, with my morals.
Mhm.
Still to this day, I'm searching for an argument against veganism because I want to have a double double from In-N-Out, right? So I'm
Yeah.
a vegan, but I'm a what's the word for it? I'm a
Reluctant.
I'm a reluctant vegan, yeah. But I say this and that like me being so like loving of animal products, and I didn't think I could ever go vegan, and now I'm here vegan. I've been vegan for, I mean, I lose track, maybe 3 or 4 years, and it's actually been for me. It's been extremely easy. So I would, yeah, I want to kind of help you, get there, man.
I think part of the reason also that I have such a strong attachment to meat, aside from the social factor of it, is that when I was younger, I was a wrestler in high school. I was good at it too. And I got really, really into like gym culture. And like living in Texas, when you get really big into the gym, people will tell you to eat like lean chicken breast, eat lean beef. You have to
Sure.
eat a lot of that, and then you carb load, come in, work out for a while, and you repeat the process. And it became so important to me that I just kept going with it. And now I'm healing from an injury. And then once my knees healed up, as long as I can start lifting weights again, I'm probably going to start doing that again. I know that there's vegan alternatives to that, like Vegan Gains does all kinds of stuff like that. But for me, it's like, it's just so like, it's something I've been doing for so long. It's something so familiar to me that it feels weird to try to break out of it. And having to experiment and test and do all that seems like a lot of work.
Yeah. So what if you had like a vegan nutritionist that would like just kind of tell you what to eat?
If I could afford to have a nutritionist, I would. That's probably something I probably would have already gone that route if I could. Right now, like I work at a gas station, so I kind of skim by, So with me, it's just I would probably switch to cutting back meat at first, going back over to whey protein, stuff like that, and working my way back through. But as it
Yeah.
stands right now, like I live in a house with 4 other people, so I cook a lot. So I kind of just cook what everybody wants. We eat a lot of seafood because we're in Florida. Fresh seafood is hard to pass up. I cook a lot of like chicken. We like to make ribs, stuff like that. But over time, I could probably swap over. It's just not in the near future for me. I don't think. I'm open to it. I've had jackfruit pulled pork before, just like fake pork, and it tastes just like pulled pork. Jackfruit is
Yeah.
a great meat alternative.
I actually disagree. I actually don't think jackfruit's a very good meat alternative, but I do like jackfruit. I just think it's its own thing.
It depends on the sauce you use. If you just have plain old jackfruit, you don't cook it the right way, it can come out really bad. But if you use the right sauces, you cook it long enough and then the right way, it'll taste pretty close.
I can see that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a big difference between just like getting a can of jackfruit and putting barbecue sauce on it versus like cooking it right. Yeah.
Yeah. Out in Texas, the way we ate it was one of my roommates. He was a Rasta, so he was like big into like going. He was like heavy on the vegetables, and then he would mix in meat, but he would smoke the jackfruit. He'd put it in like a tray and smoke it with the other meats and stuff. So in the smoker with like apple wood and then shred it over time. And it tasted like pulled pork. I've never been able to recreate it, but if you do it right, you can make it good.
Yeah, I could imagine. I guess I mean it does kind of have that texture, that pulled pork texture, especially if you shred it. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
it's a little bit softer, I guess. But
it can be, but that's why he would smoke it. He just wouldn't cover it, so a lot of that moisture would get drawn out, so it'd get a little bit more tough.
gotcha. Yeah, so I'm always down for the whole reducing your meat intake, right? Um,
Yeah. As
it's
much
like
as even chicken costs now, it's just cost effective at this point.
it's yeah, it's like Peter Singer um said that like if everybody in the world went 50% vegan, and just cut their meat intake down by 50%, it would be better than if all the vegans in the world doubled. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's
If
good.
we could find a way to make it so that meat wasn't the main focus of every dish that people eat, it would go a long way.
It would.
Vegetables,
Obviously,
vegetables stand out on their own really well. It's just people have an aversion to them.
yeah. Like obviously, the end goal for me is that everyone goes vegan, or at
Yeah.
least, or at least I've been playing around with everyone goes vegan, and then there are a couple of hunters that exist. But
Do you know why meat is like a big focus in our meals? Just out of curiosity, do you know the history of that?
well, I could. I'm not sure exactly what you're alluding to, but I can give some. I guess
Well, the
what.
recent history of it, I could narrow that down. It has a lot to do with the meat lobby. It's the
Yeah, yeah.
same reason that the food pyramid has grains at the bottom.
There's a lot of
It's
money that goes into meat. Yeah.
oh yeah, it's the same reason that people like bacon now. People used to throw away pork belly because they thought it was trash because it's all fat. They put a lot of money into making bacon like the hip thing. Same thing with filet mignon. People wouldn't eat that for a long time because it's so lean it doesn't have flavor. But they spent a lot of money in the 70s and 80s convincing women that it was a better way to lose weight to eat it because it was so lean. Now it's one of the most expensive cuts from the cow.
Yeah.
There's lobbying plays a big part in our diets.
Huge. Like my understanding is that most like animal farms actually don't make a profit. They're alive based off of government subsidies.
A good chunk of them, yeah. The people who do make money off of it, like out in Texas, there's some ranchers that have enough head of cattle to make good money off it. Those people live like kings. But
Yeah.
most of them live off of government subsidies almost exclusively.
Yeah. So my buddy Jeremy here has a pretty good comment about soy. So he's saying that like um, that's why the animal agriculture lobby is spreading lies hardcore about soy because normalization is a huge meat killer, right? It has a lot of the same similar
Mhm.
nutrients.
The baby boomers were the first ones to actually try to push soybean futures because soy could be really good for you. And one of the lies that spread is based on a half truth that soy contains a lot of estrogen, and it does, but it's not estrogen that your body processes, so it doesn't change your estrogen levels unless you eat mountains of soy. That's one of those things that I've read about a lot in the past couple of weeks. But yeah, the baby boomers were the first ones to really push like a move over to adding more soy to our food, and the meat lobby was not happy about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of fad diets too. The whole like Atkins, how do I say it? Atkinson diet. Um,
Atkins,
Atkins. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you
eat
know what I was
nothing
trying to
but
say.
meat
Yeah,
and like grapefruit juice. Yeah, my grandma
yeah,
did that years and years ago. It's
yeah,
terrible for your cholesterol. It's really, really bad for your cholesterol.
and
It's like keto, right? Keto's not very good for you. It was designed for people with epilepsy, and it's terrible for your kidneys. Like keto can be really dangerous if you do like solid keto for a long time because it does
yeah,
damage to your kidneys. Bad diets are can be very dangerous. The whole dieting industry is a really interesting topic to get into too, but I figure you probably don't have enough time to branch off entirely into that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I will mention that it happens really in all sort of diets, right? It happens with veganism too. We have
Oh
like
yeah.
fruitarians and like where they
Oh
only
yeah,
eat fruit.
fruit can
Yeah.
cause if you yeah, when you only eat fruit, it's way too much sugar. A balanced diet is really all you need, and you have to manage to balance your calories. But people get into very specific diets and like, oh, if I just eat one specific thing and nothing else, that's how I'll stay healthy. And it's just not how the body works. You have to have a basic level of everything. Iron makes hemoglobin. You even have a very small amount of arsenic in your body that is required for you to survive. You have gold in your body, right? Like you have to be able to balance all those things. And if you eat nothing but broccoli all day, it's not going to work. You have to have broccoli, cauliflower, lettuce. You have to balance it out.
Yeah.
It's
I
just hard
definitely.
to have a balanced diet in a lot of places.
I think that yeah, I definitely think the general like consensus of having a balanced diet is the correct one. Um, I don't subscribe to this weird um like y- the healthiest diet is some extreme. And a lot of people
Oh
may
yeah.
think I do because veganism seems like an extreme diet, but it's not that extreme. You can still, you know,
Oh yeah.
have a
No.
pretty balanced
If
diet.
you yeah, you can have an extremely balanced diet. If you have enough beans, it'll account for protein as well as broccoli. If you can get enough of your vitamins, magnesium, things like that just from eating vegetables, you can get an entirely balanced diet from it. You might have to take supplements if you can't get enough of certain things, but that's what supplements exist for.
Yeah, sure. I mean, B12 is the big one, right? But lucky for me, B12 is in pretty much every energy drink, and I have an addiction to energy drinks, so it's fine.
Luckily, though, B12 is water soluble, so it's kind of hard to have too much of it. That's why every like 5 hour energy is 12,000% of the B12 you're supposed to get
Yeah,
in a day.
it's pretty gnarly.
Yeah. The
Um,
the idea of the balanced diet is a strange one, especially the way that people look at it, because it's largely influenced by the food pyramid and what do they call it now? Like my plate.
I
It's
play,
still
yeah.
a little too heavy on meats. It's especially too heavy on grains. But it's I mean it's better than the food pyramid was. It's like one of those things like people always for a long time they thought fat made you fat. So people would eat fat-free food, but fat-free food was chock full of sugar. So that would cause pancreatic problems, it could cause problems for your kidneys, and it would make you fatter over time. Because your body stores the glucose, not the fat.
Yeah, it's
People
the
have a lot of
whole
misconceptions because we have a very poor education system.
for sure. Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's ups and downs with the education system for sure.
There's
But yeah,
a lot of room for improvement, but there are some things they do well.
yeah, I like that it's essentially free for everyone, aside from college, right? But like
Yeah.
elementary school through high
I
school,
think
they're
we
pretty
would do well to. I think that with high schools, we would do well to add in some, well, better history, but leaving that aside, a basic sociological course for high schoolers.
sure. Yeah,
Sociology teaches you how to empathize with other demographics. It can teach you how to better understand why certain demographics are the way they are, why they are affected by historical means the way they are. It could be really important to have high schoolers take sociology 101 courses.
and
We
philosophy
basically
as
already
well.
put them through
Also,
philosophy as well. Yeah, if we could find a way to squeeze that in, absolutely. Sociology and philosophy could both be extremely important to just the future, like having people empathize with one another in a more effective way, having people learn how to come together better, support one another. It's like people who don't understand how demographics and how statistics work are the same kind of people that throw around the old 1350 statistic. You know, black people make up 13% of the population, 50% of violent crime. Because when you hear that, you're supposed to look into it and go, why is that the way it is? And it turns out that that
sure.
is because of poverty. And that poverty comes back to redlining, Jim Crow laws. But people don't look that deep into it. You take a
Yeah,
sociology course, and it teaches you how to better look into that, how to better source information, how to parse out when somebody's lying to you. That's why I
Yeah,
think sociology would be so important.
I feel like sociology would also, going back to the whole like conversation aspect with animals. I think it would actually turn a lot more people vegan as well.
I think
The
it could
ability,
absolutely because it helps you parse out moral systems better as well.
yeah, yeah, it helps you hash out moral systems for sure. But it also just kind of opens you up to different types of connections.
Hmm. It's empathy.
Yeah,
It's a skill. People don't realize that. It's not that people aren't born with it, it's that people have to learn how to use it. And sociology helps a lot with that. Like, my mom had to take sociology courses in college, and it changed her entire outlook on the world. And the sociology courses that I sat in and the free ones that I've done online have been very eye opening to me. I think a lot of
absolutely.
people would benefit from the sociology course.
Yeah, I guess sort of like an example, um, uh, how new ideas can sort of change how you view things. It's like when I went
Hmm.
vegan, and I was working at Chick-fil-A when I went vegan. I would
Hmm.
go into work. It was almost like an off and on switch, right? It was like before,
Hmm.
these chickens, these fried chickens and stuff. It was just like part of the job, right? But now,
Yeah.
like as a vegan, I walk in there and I see all these like dead animals, and my perspective just completely changed. Where now it was very sad to go into work, and it wasn't like,
Yeah.
um, where yeah, beforehand
I
it was just
mm,
yeah,
I used to work for a company called Dorada Foods. It's out in Oklahoma. It's a factory that processes chicken for Tyson, McDonald's, and 7-Eleven. And part of the reason that I started to change my mind on like animal morality and things like that is because I would watch literally tens of thousands of pounds of chicken breast fly by me from an oven all day. And it felt like such a waste because I knew most of it was going to go in the trash. At the end of the day, we waste so much food, you know. Like my job for a lot of it was finding chicken nuggets that were shaped funny and tossing them in the garbage. And it felt like such a waste. Or chicken breasts that didn't get quite enough breading on them would just go in the trash. Like just weird things like that, and it kind of helped to swap my perspective because it just seemed like they would just bring in a tractor trailer full of chicken and just dump it down into meat grinders. Like the funny enough, one of the weirder things that I learned there was that McDonald's chicken nuggets actually are 100% chicken breast. They're not like everybody says, like, there's all those weird little conspiracies, like it's the whole bird or whatever. It
yeah,
really is all chicken breast. It just goes through a three-tier meat grinder, and that's why it feels so airy. But it just seems so wasteful to me. Like one of the things that I'm a big proponent for is ugly food. Like farmers, they have to throw out a huge chunk of their produce because supermarkets won't take it because it doesn't quite look right.
sure.
It can have like a brown spot on it or look kind of lumpy, and people won't take it. And you could donate that food, feed the homeless, just feed people who are poor. And instead, they just end up tossing out or turn it into hog slop.
Yeah,
It's strange how we handle food here.
I've heard of this company called like Misfit Market, where they'll like deliver food to your door. That's like the food that gets thrown out, which I think is a really good idea for sure. But
Baby carrots are actually part of the reason carrots don't get thrown out as much anymore. A farmer
I heard,
was having to throw away most of his carrots, and he invented a machine that would chop them into smaller pieces and then skin them, and he would start selling them. And that's what's the Blue Bunny? It might be the brand. It's the one with the rabbit on it. That brand got put on the shelves in the '80s, and it raised people's consumption of carrots by a massive percentage because people like baby carrots and they don't like ugly carrots for some reason.
yeah, baby carrots are based.
We're short sighted. Yeah, baby carrots are great, man. I fucking love baby
Yeah.
carrots. I'll eat a bag of baby carrots over a 6-piece chicken wing, a chicken tender any day.
This whole aspect of throwing away food is it kind of it highlights even more the atrocities of factory farming, right? Where it's like,
Oh yeah.
um, so Alex O'Connor has this quote where he says, extraordinary harm requires extraordinary justification. Um,
Hmm.
and factory farming causes extraordinary harm, right? And pretty much
Oh
very
yeah,
little to zero justification.
it causes
And
harm to the animals, and it causes harm to us too because of substandard feed.
yeah, and so then add that little bit of justification, which is usually comes down to like taste pleasure, right? Um, and then you're even lessening it by throwing away, because like imagine being um you're a chicken, right? And you go through um all this torturing, and then you're killed, and
Hmm.
maybe some aspect of you is like, well, maybe I'll give some joy to some kid at McDonald's one day or something, right? But then you get thrown out. And it's like it just, yeah, it really highlights just how crazy it is.
With oh, I was gonna say something. I don't remember what it is now. Oh, damn. That's the brain. When you have ADHD, your frontal lobe doesn't develop properly, so it can fuck up your memory centers. Um, like, did you know that untreated adult ADHD is considered deadly because of the memory problems?
That okay.
I was
That's
reading a
interesting.
paper about
Yeah.
that the other day. They said that because when you have, especially when you have severe ADHD as an adult, you kind of always feel lost, and that's actually very accurate. Like, sometimes you'll walk into your kitchen and you'll have this little thought where you're like, wait a minute, why did I walk in here? That is my
Yeah.
whole day. It's just walking into places and going like, well, shit, I don't remember what I was going to do here. And then forgetting what I was doing. It happens at my job all the time. But yeah, I didn't know that it was that serious. I haven't had my meds for like 7 or 8 years, and I'm just now able to sign up for company healthcare so I can get them again. And I cannot wait. But yeah, no, that's an interesting thing about that little thing that people don't realize. A lot of people don't take ADHD seriously because they just think that it means that you tap your feet. I've heard people say unironically that they think ADHD is a superpower. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
adding
yeah.
that to what I was going to say, it's like with factory farming. Oh, that's what it was. The world's most sought after meat products are the ones that require the most suffering. Pate, caviar, high grade like Wagyu beef. To get the marbling on Wagyu beef, they have to feed cows all this horrible shit, and they have to keep them from exercising until they just bloat. When you make pate, they take geese and step on their feet, put a funnel down their throat, and just force feed them grains until their livers turn diseased, and then it's spreadable and buttery. Like it's caviar. Like beluga sturgeon almost completely went extinct because beluga caviar was so sought after. And I've eaten all kinds of cheap caviar. It all tastes exactly the same. It's salty and it pops in your mouth. You can get the same effect from snail caviar. It tastes exactly the same and it doesn't cause you to kill anything. Gordon Ramsay tried it on TV and the sales for it went up. It's it's strange just how much that ties together. Like the suffering is almost the point, right?
Yeah.
It kind of feels the same way with like our strange system that we live under, especially with the work culture. That's a topic for another day.
I have seen a little bit of a shift. Of course, we've seen sort of a rise in veganism, right? But we've also seen a
Hmm.
rise in like this sort of humane farming. Now you can argue
Yeah,
that it's not actually humane, right? But certainly like um, sort of like regenerative farming, or like only
yeah.
hunting your meat is going to be far better than buying like factory farmed meat.
It's more
And
sustainable.
yeah, 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 more sustainable, and it probably causes at least a good amount of a good less amount of
I I
suffering.
would take I would take a lot more refuge in knowing that a hunter killed something that I'm going to eat than like a farmer with a bolt, because like I've known a lot of people who are hunters. And I don't know if you've been around. I mean, you live in Utah, so you might have. But being around people who hunt, the number one thing that every hunter I've ever met, and even hunters that I see online, have in common is a respect for the animal. You want to clean kills so they don't suffer. You want to make sure that you do everything you can to make sure that the suffering is as short as possible, if there is any at all. There's a lot of respect. You use every single part of it. There's not a lot of waste. You use the skin, the bones, everything. I appreciate that. I love venison. If there was a place that farmed venison, I couldn't buy from them because I know that the same respect wouldn't be paid to the animal.
Sure. Yeah, and another thing with hunting is that a lot of hunters see it as like sort of a necessary evil to protect the ecosystem, um, which is
Yeah, hunting deer can be really important because we've really screwed up predator populations, and
sure.
it can devastate ecosystems to have too much deer. That can be a completely necessary evil. It's like trophy hunting, right? Like a lot of people just see that as a net negative, as it turns out, most trophy hunting, when it's done legally, actually puts a lot of money into conservation. And when you trophy hunt, you have to wait like a year for them to find an animal that's past its mating age or like extremely violent that's hurting other animals so that you can hunt it. And it's meant to keep the population safer. It also puts a lot of money into conservation to keep poachers from getting a hold of animals and just trying to keep them safer, making sure they're healthy. It's there are some things that are not necessarily on their face completely morally justifiable, but at the same time, they do have a net positive.
Yeah, I mean,
Now, when
possibly.
people
So
hunt like cougars and wolves, that I can't justify that. I can't justify hunting cougars and wolves. We don't have enough of them as it stands. If there's too many in an area, sure, but like there's an entire species of wolf that was native to Ireland that no longer exists because some noble in the past decided that he thought that they were just either too dangerous or that they didn't represent England's values, so they had them hunted to extinction, and now that entire species is gone.
I agree and I also disagree. Um, and it kind of comes down to what I value, right? So I value the ecosystem only in so much that it increases well-being or reduces suffering, right? But
Hmm.
if we were to do something that maybe hurt the ecosystem, but increased animal well-being higher than the hurt of than the suffering that the ecosystem being hurt would cause,
Hmm.
then we should probably do that, right? So there's like an argument.
Well,
Um,
that's why they put out certain numbers of deer tags, because if there's too many of them, it hurts the deer population. It cuts down on grazing land, and it eventually can kill entire forests.
sure,
That's
yeah.
that's what I
So
mean when I say like there's a reason to do it. It's only so far justifiable as it stands to keep the deer safer. It also
uh,
can cut down on disease spread with the deer population.
so this is where I kind of start to disagree with hunters. Is that like um, I'm sympathetic towards the hunting argument because I can see reasons for why hunting is going to like reduce animal suffering. Um, but what happens what I see with like conservationists is like is they tend to want to protect a species for for the species sake and not so much for the suffering or the well-being of the species, where it
Mhm.
may be the case that certain species we would want to just have go extinct, harm the ecosystem a little bit, but in the big picture increase animal well-being because the species is causing some x amount of suffering. So an example would be like um, it if we could get rid of lions, if we could stop lions from eating zebras,
Mhm.
right? Um, and not have like an ecological collapse. Maybe the environment just like loses 10% net like functionality or whatever. But now the
Mhm.
zebras experience like um 50% or like 1,000% increased well-being because they're not getting eaten alive. Um, then I think we should
Well,
do
in the
that,
short
right?
term, that would be how that would play out. But the problem is that without a natural predator to take down zebras, they would overpopulate very quickly. With the
Sure.
overpopulation, there would be problems of genetic drift. There'd be well, not genetic drift. That's underpopulation. There would be problems with like increasing rates of disease. There'd be problems with running out of food because there's not anything keeping the population down. Zebras all eat the same things. Eventually, it just would run out. There'd be a lot of issues that would come. That's why there's like a real delicate balance with the rate of predators and prey, right? You need a certain amount of like hawks to mice, right? You need a certain amount of of like mountain lions to deer and wolves. You have to maintain that balance because otherwise, with an overpopulation, new diseases could form. Extreme rates of disease spread could happen that could wipe out entire populations because there's not enough of them being taken down by predators. That's that's actually really important to the way ecosystems run. It's all a delicate balance. We just kind of interfere with that balance and screw it up. Like taking away all the forests that used to be in the area that I live in now. That's why, like, or like in California, even like in LA, when they find cougars, they cut them open to find out what they used to eat, and they almost exclusively survive on people's pets because they don't have enough to feed on in their areas. So deforestation kind of causes us to need to really regulate how those populations play out.
Sure. Yeah, I'm very big into human intervention in the wild, just because the wild has such extreme amounts of suffering that we kind of need to be the moral reasoners. In a world
I'd say that humans need to intervene because we've done enough damage. We need to kind of control the damage we already do.
Yeah, well, and this kind of comes back to what does fixing look like, right? And again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, where it tends to be that a lot of hunters value the ecosystem as a person, that like it's a thinking thing, and that's like their end value. Or my end value is about the well-being of the animals within that ecosystem.
Well, those things are intrinsically tied together. If you can't make sure that the ecosystem remains healthy, the animals will suffer. Increased competition for food causes starvation. It can cause increased violent competition between animals. Like, for example, Ray, I don't know if this is true. This is just something like hypothetical in my head. Say that you have too many deer. There's no more wolves, no more cougars, and we can't possibly cull them quick enough. Let's say that now that there's that much competition, there's so many deer, now deer have to get more violent when they rut. And it could cause more infection because there could be more wounds from bucks fighting each other. It could be that because the disease rates increase, now all of a sudden they're getting wiped out in entire areas, and it causes a problem with genetic diversity. That's like I usually just default to the scientists when it comes to that, because the people who actually study conservation are keeping in mind the animals themselves. Because having too many of one thing in one area can cause a lot of issues. Like invasive species, we put carp into ponds because they're fun to catch, and now they wipe out whole species. That's why you're not supposed to flush goldfish, because they're super invasive. Carp.
Yeah,
there's
red-eared slider turtles as well. Yeah, it's a very common pet turtle, and but they live for like 40 or 50 years. You'll get them as a kid, and then you'll go off to college or whatever, and like, I don't want to take my turtle with me, so you just put it in your local river, and yeah. But so I was actually having a conversation last night with this guy hunting Appalachia, and he had a really cool take that I actually agree with, is that we should hunt, or I guess how he described it, more of a euthanasia. We should euthanize feral cats.
I'd say we should fix them, not necessarily euthanize them, but yeah. Cats are responsible for wiping out hundreds of bird populations to extinction.
They're one of the
extremely invasive.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really fun conversation. It was about like the reason. So I guess the main reason that we should euthanize them. Well, so I'll give you his position and then my position.
Sure.
He comes from like a hunting conservation background. And and apparently the like trap, neuter, and release is actually highly ineffective. And just from like a statistical standpoint, like it seems to be highly more effective to euthanize them. From my perspective as a vegan, from my perspective, So going back to the whole lions, right? A
Yeah.
lion eating a zebra is a bad thing, but it may be a necessary evil to protect like the ecosystem. So there may be some justification there, right, for the zebra suffering. But when it comes to a feral cat being a lion to birds and to mice and causing this sort of animal suffering, there really isn't that ecological justification because they're an invasive species. So
Yeah.
you essentially have this monster running around causing the suffering, and for little justification, right? So
Yeah.
even if you were to
We
try
have
to
those
neuter,
little monsters running around and killing things because we think they're cute.
sure,
That's the crux of it, really.
and that's also why it would be wrong to have. I think it'd be wrong to have outdoor cats as well. I think if you have a cat, I mean, with
Oh
modern
yeah, absolutely.
technology and stuff, with modern technology and things, I guess we've been able to develop like nutritious vegan cat foods. Um, but, but but yeah, when it comes to like the nature of cats, they're obligate carnivores, and so if you leave them
Mhm.
outside, or especially if they're feral, again, they're going to be running around causing this suffering. So I'd rather them not
Oh yeah.
exist than exist. Yeah.
Oh, you won't hear a lot of argument from me on that. I don't have a lot of love for cats. I don't know if you'll be able to see it right here in my lip. There's a weird little cut. When I was a kid, I was jumping on a bed and my kitten flew up in there and took a big chunk out of my lip. And ever since then, I've had a predilection against cats. You won't hear a lot of argument from me when it comes to cats. I'm a big dog person myself. I have a boxer right now. She's stunted though. My aunt's worked for an animal hospital in Gainesville for about 22 years, so she gets big discounts on animal surgery. And when we found her, they found her in Sumter County, and it looked like somebody had tossed her out a car window. Her right back hip was broken off at the ball, so my aunt paid to have it fixed, and then we took her in. We've had her for 5 or 6 years now.
It's awesome.
I'm big on dogs. I don't like small ones though. Little dogs. I don't particularly trust little dogs, and I'm 6 feet tall and I wear boots everywhere I go. It's not safe for me to have little dogs because I don't
Sure.
notice them when I walk around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have a dog as well. And he's a big one. He's fun. So okay, so let's get you vegan. Um, if so I'm thinking, so if I talk to some of my vegan nutrition friends, if I can get one of them to agree to make you a meal plan, would you follow it?
It would kind of depend monetarily and access wise, because I do live in Florida. So my access to certain things would be different than the access in Utah, and the cost of living is very high in Florida. So right
Sure.
now, I just kind of get what I can afford to get. We might have to move out of the state here in the next couple of years. So if I ended up moving back to the Midwest or somewhere else in the South, I could probably afford to do that. But right now, I just kind of get by with what I can get. At the moment,
Sure.
it's more subsistence than anything else.
Yeah, I'll kind of talk around and see if I can come up with someone. Um, in the meanwhile, I would just encourage eat less meat, right? Eat less animal products.
I eat a lot of rice. I eat a lot of like broccoli. I eat a lot of spinach. I try to make sure I get like bell peppers. I try to make sure I get a lot of vegetables mixed in with my meat because meat's expensive anyway.
Sure.
So like if I make like two chicken breasts, they're about 2 pounds of chicken. I'll have it mixed with like 2 or 3 cups of rice, and then I've got bell peppers and all kinds of other stuff in it. Because like lucky me, I learned how to cook when I was young. I'm not incapable, so I can make pretty much anything taste good. I just don't have as much experience cooking with just vegetables as I'd like. Usually, what I'll do is I'll just steam them or I'll fry them, and that's just how I can go about it. Not deep
Yeah,
fried, just like cook them in a pan.
sure. Yeah, that's what I usually do. I just do with some olive oil or something in a pan. Or the thing that is really gangster, as far as like vegetables go, is oven baked broccoli. That's the good stuff.
Hmm. What we used to do is we would buy broccoli and mushroom batter, and we would deep fry it, and then it would make it all crispy on the outside, nice and soft on the inside. It was really good. We don't get to make it much anymore because they don't make the batter we used to buy. But we're trying to find a new one. You live in the South, you kind of learn to deep fry everything. I mean, you go to the flea markets and the circuses around here, they got deep fried butter. It's kind of deep in the culture.
Goodness, yeah, it's wild. But
Deep
at the
fried
same
butter
time,
is the grossest thing I've ever heard of.
yeah, but at the same time, like people like it, right? So I would like to see more like, um, I think vegan junk food is actually a very good thing, right? You have all these Beyond Burgers
Yeah.
and
If you can have like junk food and snacks, it makes it easier to pull people over rather than just the mainline steamed vegetables. Yeah.
yeah,
I think that they should stop trying to make vegan bacon. I've never seen that pan out very well. I think that's a lost cause on that front, but you can make a decent burger.
yeah, yeah. No, I will say I don't think I've ever had a decent vegan bacon before. Um, Between all the different brands I've tried, it seems to, yeah, never really pan out. It doesn't have that. It
I
doesn't have
think
like
I, the texture that you need for sure.
exactly. Yeah,
I think a big part of the problem for a lot of people is when they look into going vegan, they find a lot of tofu based stuff, and you either really like tofu or you don't. And a lot of
sure.
people just don't because they're used to the texture. Like if you buy a tofu dog, it doesn't feel like a hot dog. So people who are just like, I guess I'll try this tofu thing, they're not committed to it, and they'll try it and go like, don't like it, go back to eating pork. But if you could find better alternatives that feel better, you could find a way to firm up the tofu a lot more. There's ways you could make people like it. It's just that people are ill informed, so they read blogs that are like tofu dogs changed me to vegans, and they just go, "Oh, that's ridiculous," and they don't even try it. Like
Yeah,
I'll try anything. I'm not picky. I was homeless for a while, so I kind of just you got to learn to stop being picky when you end up in that kind of situation. So I'll try anything once.
sure.
That's
And my
just that's how I am.
yeah, my experience is like if you try something once and you don't like it, try it a few more times and you probably will.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of things are acquired tastes. If you don't give your chance to acquire the taste, you'll never like it.
Yeah. I used to actually I used to
For-
not like tofu, and now I love tofu. I eat
Mhm.
it 2 or 3 times a
The
week.
the only thing that I like tofu in is miso soup, and I can totally leave out the tofu in it. It's just a textural issue for me.
Sure.
That's just the ADHD though. Like I don't like beach sand because of the texture of it. Like certain kinds of cloth, it's just weird things get on my nerves.
Yeah, that's the I mean, yeah, people can have preferences, and that's the thing with veganism is like it seems like you're gonna be restricting a large portion of your diet, um, but there's such a wide variety of vegetables and plants that you
Oh
can
yeah. If
turn
people
into
weren't
different food.
so focused on like vegan meat alternatives and they just tried vegan food in general, more people would like it.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
think there's a
trying to find like people try vegan meat alternatives because they're like, this will taste exactly like the meat, and that's just impossible. It's not. It's an impossible standard to try to meet, so people just give up before they even start.
sure. I think there's a balance that needs to be had, right? So it's like there is a big issue with this whole like um like vegan is a health food. You have like
Hmm.
the vegan is next to the gluten-free section or whatever. Um
Yeah,
and it's like, sometimes I just want a gross gas station hot dog but not have to like hurt animals for it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I stock those gross gas station hot dogs every morning too, and I know exactly. Some people come in and they're like, "It's not good, but I gotta have it."
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's a balance to be had because I think um I overall I prefer like the traditional sort of vegan food, right? But
Hmm.
every once in a while, yeah, I just want something gross and nasty, and I want it to be vegan.
Yeah,
I
I
think that's
mean,
how.
everybody needs something that feels like it's unhealthy or something that's gross. You know, you got to have something greasy every once in a while. Everybody's got that urge. You know, potato
Yeah, and
chips. You know, a lot of people eat potato chips, even though a lot of people don't like them. They still eat them because they're greasy and crispy.
sure, yeah, and a lot of people yeah, so I feel like a lot of people get turned off from veganism because they think they're gonna have to be healthy. Like, it's like it's some diet they have to go
Yeah,
on, where they only eat kale and quinoa.
yeah. There's also like a weird stigma with it. Like you'll hear a lot of comedians make jokes where they're like, "Can you believe it? I met an unhealthy vegan today," and they were like, "Oh, Oreos are vegan." It's like, yeah, Oreos are fucking vegan. Like,
Yeah,
you can eat unhealthy and still be vegan. Absolutely, you can still have sweets. You can still enjoy all the junky shit that you like that's not good for you. All the same. It's
yeah.
looking at it from a weird lens.
A lot of like my top top favorite candies are all vegan, so I didn't have to give up. The only thing I had to give up so much was Snickers bars. Like I haven't had a Snickers bar for years.
Yeah.
I used to love those, but
Chocolate
um,
is one of those ones that you have to be really careful with because it's kind of hard to find vegan chocolate.
yeah. But yeah, again, all my top candies, Swedish Fish and Sour Patch Kids, and Skittles, like they're all vegan, so I didn't have to like
Oh, I
give
love
up.
sour candy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's delicious.
This I does Sour Patch Kids use non beef derived gelatin?
No, there's no gelatin in Sour Patch Kids.
Oh my god, that is true. I always thought they're flies. I always figured they would be because they're gummy, but they are kind of firm. It would make sense they don't have gelatin.
Yeah,
Hmm.
typically, so
Learn something
like
new every day.
yeah, gummy worms, gummy bears, they usually have gelatin. Every once in a while, you'll find some vegan gummy bears, but yeah, most of them are gonna have gelatin in them. Um,
Makes
but
them
it's
softer, yeah.
yeah, it's that like Swedish fish texture. Usually that doesn't
Hmm.
have the gelatin. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like a little bit harder. People go, "Oh, it's supposed to be gummy candy. Why isn't it soft?" Yeah, that makes sense. No gelatin would do that.
yeah,
See, my girl, she would know a lot more about stuff like that because she loves to bake, and I don't have the patience for it. I just like to cook. The way I always put it is, cooking is an art, and baking is rocket science. So when you bake, you do a lot more with texture. You do a lot more with like you have to balance everything just right. Add gelatin to make things a little softer, things like that. I don't have that kind of
yeah,
patience.
yeah. I'm not a huge baker, but I am a hobbyist cookie baker, and it's so
I am a disastrous baker. Like if I want her to bake something, I just have to threaten to make it myself. And if I tell her I want brownies, she's like, I don't want to cook brownies. I'm like, that's okay, I'll make them. And she'll go in the kitchen and make fucking brownies.
yeah.
I
Well, the thing
can't
about
even make
baking
cookies out of the package.
the thing about baking, and it's similar to like cooking, is like once you sort of learn how to or bake a few different things, you can start combining them into new things and creating different things off of that.
Mhm.
But there is something it's like I'll bake cookies, and I feel like I did
I
everything
can still
right.
hear you because I got headphones in. I'm just going to turn on the light because it's getting a little dim in here.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so like I'll make cookies, and I feel like I did everything right, but you just add like just a little too much flour, or like a little too much water or whatever, and then it's like it's just this big
I
old like yeah.
I tried to bake her a cake for her birthday one year because we were living in like a really dumpy apartment and like our oven didn't even work right because the people before us had a problem with mice and it ate all the insulation. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna really try and I'm gonna make a vanilla cake because we have everything we need. But the one thing that screwed it up was that they wanted me to beat the yolks to stiff peaks, and all I had was a fork in a hot apartment. So I tried and I put it all together. I baked it and I gave her a piece. And she goes, I really appreciate the effort, but have you tried this? And I said, no. And she goes, it's a brick. I put in baking powder and everything, but I couldn't get the eggs to real stiff peaks. So it just flattened. And I tried to make her an icing, but I didn't have real butter. So it just turned into like this weird lumpy sugar concoction.
Classic.
I can make some mean pancakes, but I can't bake a cake to save my life.
Not even a boxed cake?
A box cake I'm usually okay with, but every once in a while I'll forget a step, or I'll forget that my oven's temperature is a little higher than it says, and it'll bake wrong, or it'll get too firm on the top. I won't set the timer right. It's just like memory issues. That's another issue for me with like baking, is that if I don't have a really, really irritating timer, I'll forget that I'm doing it until it burns. When you cook, you're standing over it the whole time, so you can't really forget about it. Like the only thing I cook that takes a long time is my spaghetti sauces. I put a lot of pride in my spaghetti sauces. Like the one that I usually make takes 12 fucking hours. And I put it in a crock pot and I have to
gosh.
stir it every 20 minutes so it doesn't burn. But I make a killer spaghetti sauce. I've never had somebody complain about it. It's not vegan, but it is a good spaghetti sauce.
Hey, make it vegan, my man.
Oh no, I would have to make a whole new recipe because mine has like cream cheese and butter in it. Like that's the active thing. I could probably find a way with enough tinkering to do it, and I probably will just because I'm curious about it. If I just use San Marzano tomatoes, a little bit of olive oil, omit some of the butter that they would usually have me put in, and just substitute a little extra oil and salt, I could probably make that work.
Yeah, I mean,
But
well,
I wouldn't be able to make a very big batch of it.
they have vegan butter, right? I mean, it essentially it's just margarine, but yeah, vegan
Did
butter. They
you
have,
did you know that margarine used to be hot pink?
it used to be what?
Did you know that? Hot pink.
Hot pink.
You- yeah, the
Dang.
butter farmers, when they found out that margarine was coming out and it tasted like butter, sued to make sure that it couldn't be dyed yellow so it looked like butter because they thought that would hurt their sales. So for a long time, it was bright, bright pink. And there's still brands today that make margarine that say they do it the old-fashioned way that make it hot pink today.
Oh, that's so crazy.
I
I'm looking at pictures.
I didn't have yeah, I didn't have friends when I was growing up. I just had a lot of nonfiction books, so I'm filled with weird random knowledge. Like there's a girl that has like a TikTok that comes into my gas station, and when she walks in, she'll have her camera going, and she'll go, "Tell me something about armadillos," or "Tell me something about dolphins," just anything random, and I'll be able to spout something off the top of my head because I just did so much reading when I was younger.
You do well at a trivia night for sure.
Oh yeah, I always did. I was a bouncer for a few years in a couple of different states, and they always like told me not to take part in the trivia night because I would make people upset. Because I just know too much random useless knowledge. I could blow out the trivia nights, and they're like, "We're doing this to make people drink. Stop! Or just you stop doing it. You're making it go by too fast." That's the one thing that I've always been able to take pride in is like my intelligence. I have a hard time taking like positive affirmations, but my intelligence have always been very affirmative. So I always like try not to get a big head about that. Yeah.
That's good,
I've
man.
always been a smart kid. I've been reading at a college level since I was like since I was six. The first book I can remember reading is Dolores Claiborne. It's a Stephen King book. Like I've always been pretty smart.
That's awesome.
I want to actually, as a matter of fact, when I start streaming to my own channel more regularly, I want to have, once I have enough people, I want to have like segments where I'll have people come in and ask me random stuff like that so I can give answers and then have people check me in real time to make sure that I'm remembering things right.
I'd watch it. That'd be so cool.
It's a niche thing, but it's fun. It's a challenge.
Yeah, see, I do not have a good memory, so it's hard for me to remember random facts. Yeah,
I
feel
wouldn't
like
remember any of it if I hadn't reread all of those books like 10 times.
oh for sure. Yeah, I feel like for me, so you mentioned that like you've always been sort of like this in um what's the word you've kind of had like a mind that's
I absorb things really quickly. It's just hard to hold on to them.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Um, for me, it's kind of it's almost not like that. I feel like I've always grown up being maybe average to like less intelligent than most people. Um, but I feel like I've always been very curious, um, which has led me to enjoy
Funny
like
enough, I credit my ADHD for a lot of that because when I was in school, I started to just because my mom was in like psych courses, I started to write things down that I noticed. And one of the things that was a really strong thorough line for me was that kids with ADD would always be, they were more predisposed to dyslexia. They would always be in like the behind courses, and kids with ADHD were always in like the ACE program. And I think that my ADHD is part of the reason why I was always in those advanced courses and why I was always like reading and doing things like that. I think that was partially influencing it. Speaking of which, that is not a distinction anymore. ADHD is the only distinction now. They've removed ADD from the DSM, which is kind of
heard that.
strange.
But yeah, what's the reason
They
behind
did
that?
it a couple of years ago. I'm not totally sure. I've actually tried to read about that for a while, and I haven't been able to find a lot of concrete study about it because I don't think like there's probably studies going on right now to investigate it. Oh, do you mean like the difference between the ADD and the ADHD kids, or why they removed ADD?
Why they removed it?
Because it was a somewhat meaningless distinction. So ADHD kind of encompasses all of it. So like ADD is attention deficit disorder, ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So not all kids with ADD or ADHD have hyperactivity, but they all share a lot of very, very similar symptoms, and they still get treated with the same treatments. You take stimulants because they flatten out your focus and they help you to function like a regular person. So like if I take Adderall, which I was prescribed for a time, I don't get real hyper in it. It doesn't make me like buzzed, right? It just makes me act normal. It makes so I don't talk as much. I don't interrupt people quite so often. I can focus on things. When somebody who doesn't have ADHD or ADD takes it, they call them study drugs because it makes you focus real hard, but it also makes you really jittery and it makes you kind of jumpy and it affects. It's an amphetamine, so it affects you like a lighter form of meth, really. Um, like the it opens up neural pathways that you don't normally have because you don't have enough neuroreceptors properly functioning in your brain when you have ADHD. That and your frontal lobe isn't properly put together. But I think that if I remember right, ADD was removed. I think it was because they said it was a basically meaningless distinction. The treatment path is the same. The only small differences were like the different types of learning disabilities that would have crossover. So with ADD, you were more likely to have dyslexia, stronger learning handicaps. With ADHD, you weren't as likely to end up with dyslexia and other like reading disabilities and things like that. But it wasn't enough spread to keep the distinction, I think. I I think so. I was reading about that like 3 or 4 days ago, so it's not super fresh in my mind. I think that's why it was.
I wonder if
Yeah,
it's
that
like it
was
sounds.
what, 4 years ago.
Yeah, it sounds like it's maybe familiar or similar to the whole getting rid of Asperger's. Um,
Yeah,
um,
they blended
yeah,
in with autism spectrum disorder.
yeah, that makes sense.
There's a few different autistic disorders that got blended into ASD. As a matter of fact, there's actually they tested me for autism like 9 times throughout my life because there's so much crossover between ADHD and autism that they thought that I probably had both. And from what my last psychiatrist told me, I'm on the spectrum for autism, but it's very, very light. So it's not even really enough to qualify.
I
So that could
suspect
just be the ADHD.
a lot of us are on the spectrum and don't realize it. I didn't go to my first like I rarely go to the doctor. Last time I went to the doctor was probably maybe 6 years ago. Um, and I had never gone to a therapist except for earlier this year was the first time I ever went to a therapist, and it was funny. I went to a therapist and she's just sitting there writing in her notebook, And then she's like, you should go to a psychiatrist. And then I go to the psychiatrist, and she's just sitting there. And I'm like, I'm an open book, so I'm just spilling out my entire life. And they're just like,
Oh yeah.
you have so much to say. Yeah, and then I got diagnosed with I actually went there because I thought I had ADHD.
Mhm.
And I went there, and through all this writing and stuff, they're just like, yeah, you have bipolar disorder. And I was like, what?
Oh, they told me I had bipolar disorder once, and my mom was like, "You need to retest him immediately because I don't think he's bipolar, and I do not want that on his medical record if he's not." And it turned out I wasn't, but I had to get a second opinion.
Yeah. Well, for me, when they explained it to me and I looked back at my life, I was like, oh, that makes complete sense. So I had been living my life with undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and I just thought it was like normal.
It's always weird how all those little things click together when you find out that you've got something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
when
it's
you look
crazy.
back through your life and all those pieces fall into place, and you're like, "Oh shit! Oh, I do. Oh my god!" Like
Yeah.
like I've had depression my whole life, but I've had since I was about 8 or 9 years old. I've had clinical depression, and I didn't know. The other term for that you commonly hear is severe depression, and I didn't know it was that bad until I got committed when I worked for Walmart. And it was actually really important to learn that I have severe depression and not just depression, because it made me more able to talk about it. It made me more likely to open up to people about things. So I've had clinical depression, suicidal ideations my whole life, and I thought that because when you're a teenager, everybody around you jokes about like, oh, I want to kill myself.
Yeah.
I thought that everybody else was serious about it too. I didn't know that it was strange for me until I was in college, and like all this stress had built up, and I mentioned it to my mom. I finally told her about it, and she was like, "We need to talk about this, and we need to figure out what's going on." And then a few years later, I was working for Walmart, had a crisis. They committed me, and they're like, "Yeah, no, you have clinical depression. You need to be treated for this immediately." And it made a lot of things make a lot of sense when I figured out that it was actually severe. And I'm glad that I did, because I'm medicated now. I'm living a much more normal, happier life because I went on Seroquel. The first thing they put me on was Celexa, and that was a terrible, terrible time. Yeah, Celexa made me have hallucinations, like horror movie hallucinations. So I had to stop taking that, and I was so afraid of getting medicated again. I didn't get on Seroquel until about a year and a half ago. Man, it's such a good thing I did. But when you circling back around, finding out that you have something that was not properly diagnosed, and watching all of those things through your life kind of fall into line, and you're like, oh my god, all of these things finally make sense. It's frustrating and fulfilling at the same time.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's like someone gives you an answer to all your suffering. They're like, here's an answer, and then here are different ways we can fix it. And it's yeah, it's empowering for sure.
I didn't know until that time that I had PTSD from the time I was homeless. I had no idea that that's what it was, because I grew up my most formative years were spent living on Fort Hood. So I heard a lot of the you couldn't possibly have it because you're not a soldier. I just believed that stupid shit for a long time. And I remember I said that to my doctor. I was like, I've never been to war, because you don't need to go to war. You live through something that's so traumatizing that some people just don't survive it. It makes sense that you would. Hey, I will. I'm still doing my thing. I told you I had that tonight. Mom, but
That's all good.
yeah. It's just it's weird finding those things out. Now I have another PTSD related thing that I have to deal with because of the injury I mentioned. You probably can't see it from this angle. I have an electric scooter back here that Florida made it so you can't buy a gas powered scooter without a license anymore. I just never had one. So I bought a 72-pound electric scooter that does 28 miles an hour. And I ended up doing, there's a road that I have to ride up to get to my house that has no street lights. So I couldn't see that the shoulder ends in a square cut until I was right on that cut. I hit my brakes. It has disc brakes. The whole thing turned and my foot hit the ground. I got launched off that foot. And I had a spiral fracture up my shin and a shattered tibial plateau. So now I've got a nice fresh set of scars, about 12 pins and a plate in my knee, all because I just was too impatient. But now every time I ride past that part of the road, I have to stop and like stand on it and process it, because I can relive that moment by moment. And for me, I thrive under stress. So this is like, to me, this is just like a new avenue, right? This is a new formative experience. This is a new thing for me to learn from. But I didn't realize like the gravity of having to actually deal with that. So part of me getting medicated is also getting therapy for that. I only have a couple more months to recover. I was actually talking to Carson while he was in the hospital, trying to set up a time to talk. Yeah, no, it's life is weird. I went off on a strong tangent. I'm sorry.
Oh, we're all good, man. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the whole conversation about how suffering is relative.
Yeah.
Where like there was this Holocaust survivor, and I always bring it up, but I always forget the name of the book. But there was this Holocaust survivor that wrote this book, and she gives this example where it's like, you could have somebody get the wrong colored car and essentially experience the same amount of suffering as someone like in the Holocaust. Most likely that's not going to be the case, but like theoretically it's entirely possible, right? Where the person in the Holocaust may have developed some sort of stoic ability to handle suffering better, and then the person getting the wrong colored car could maybe they haven't they don't have the right like brain chemistry or whatever to handle something
sometimes
like
it's just lacking the formative experience as required to deal with stuff like that. Like if you grow up real hard, there's a lot of things you'll be able to deal with. But if you grow up in the suburbs your whole life, there's some things that'll just be like a crisis that other people will look at and be like, how does that even bother you? Like I grew up, when I was growing up, I lived everywhere from like the ghetto to the suburbs, right? I've lived a varied and interesting life, and I'm kind of happy that I have, because it's shaped me into the kind of person that I am. But at the same time, it kind of saddens me that I have such resilience, because it means that I've already gone through so much in my life. But there are things that I put up with that drive people to drug abuse. Like that's why a lot of homeless people turn to it. That's why I'm a huge advocate for the homeless, because I've lived through that, and I've seen how people treat homeless people. And it's no wonder to me that homeless people have to drink and do drugs to get to sleep. Like when I sleep, I have to sleep with my arm cocked like this, because I used to sleep like that so I wouldn't get kicked in the head if somebody tried to jump me in my sleep. It's just like, it's a really cruel world. And like if this takes off and I do really, really good, one of the things that I want to do with my money is I want to open a secular mission, because one of the bigger issues that I had going the missions to get food was that you have to sit through like a 2-hour sermon before you can eat. And there are some people who that completely goes against their religion. Some people just aren't religious. So I'd love to have a secular mission where you can just go to sit down and eat, and you can choose to pray in your own way with whatever you believe, wherever you want to, or you can just sit down and eat. And I think that would be a really good thing to have. I'd like to build like shelters, and like Mr. Beast does that. Like for all the misgivings with Mr. Beast, he does a lot of good things with his money, and I'd like to do something like that. Like there's like, I still eat my food too fast. I sleep with my arm cocked with my shoulder. Like I've had to develop some pretty negative things because of that. And there are some people who can't make it through that. There's some people who thrive in that. Like I like stress. I keep up with like politics, keeping up with the American political landscape every day is just numbing. I love it. So I like
Same.
to be involved in that. I listen to it. I keep up with it. I like the stress because I like to stay informed, but some people just can't handle it, and that's totally fine because it
I,
is it's so hard to keep up with.
I love all the
Like it's
drama.
just different
Yeah.
stress. Yeah, right. Like I even though it kind of scares me, the kind of drama that we deal with in our current political landscape, I like it. I also have ODD, so that means that I'm predisposed to arguing with people. So I find that arguing with people online keeps me from arguing with the people in my life. So politics
Sure.
is the perfect reason to do that. But different strokes for different folks, right? You know,
Yeah.
like you said, some people go through the Holocaust and experience the same kind of like some people fucking like their Holocaust is getting a pink Mercedes instead of blue. It's strange how that works. Psychology is an interesting field if you can sit through the really boring parts of learning about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Like that's
And
why I've always been interested in true crime because of the psychology of it myself.
yeah, I'm a yeah, true crime is interesting for sure. I want to so we're coming up we're at an hour and 35 minutes. So I do
Hmm.
want to start kind of closing things up, but I wanted to talk to you about
Sure.
just because you brought it up, I think it'd be fun to talk to you about your political views. Um
Oh, I'm all for it.
sure.
I'm as far left as they come. I'm a socialist. Like I'm
Oh,
big
okay.
into that.
What
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
interesting. So what why are you a socialist?
Because I believe in redistributive policy. I believe in like getting stronger protections for the average person. Like for example, one of the things that really bothers me is it's a statistic that I learned a ways back. It's that something like 64. I've seen the number going anywhere between 60 and 68, but the most common one I see is 64. 64% of Americans cannot afford a $400 like surprise expense because they live paycheck to paycheck. There are
Sure.
some people that live in California that make six-figure incomes that live as close to the wire as I do, and that should not be happening. I believe in decommodifying housing because shelter is a requirement to survive. Like I don't think the corporation should be able to buy up 90% of the housing in an area and then artificially skyrocket house prices to hundreds of thousands of dollars because it's in their profit margins. In New York, there is just as many empty apartments and houses as there are homeless people, but those homeless people can't get in them because the credit requirements are too high and the cost of living is too high. Well, in New York City specifically, not New York as a whole, I don't know about all of New York. But yeah, like my grandma's from the Bronx. It's there's a lot that happens in our society, like the suffering that capitalism causes, the horrifying things that corporations do to people on a daily basis, the death squads that Coca-Cola has hired, the terrible things that Nestle has done to people in Africa. There's a lot that exists in the society that serves to radicalize me to the left a lot further. The
Sure.
first
Yeah.
person to do that actually was Bernie. I love Bernie, man. He's the only politician that I've found that has no dirt. Going back through his entire political career, you can't find bad shit to say about him. He was arrested for protesting for civil rights during the civil rights movement. All the way as far back as the 80s, he's been doing talks with kids to try to empower young girls to find careers that would traditionally go to men and telling them that they could do anything men can. He's been ahead of the curve on everything. He's just somebody that I look up to.
Same. I'm a
I
big fan
hope
of Bernie Sanders.
that's not very loud. It's raining right outside my garage. I hope that's not too loud.
Uh, it's medium loud, medium loud,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's all right. So what do you? So what is your like definition of socialism?
Uh, well, there's like the specific definition. But for me, it's not like following the very strict like theory of socialism. For me, socialism revolves around workers' rights, full-on democracy, uh, protections for the poor, broad social safety nets, free healthcare, free education, stuff like that. It's just trying to make sure that we can give back to people who need it, preferably by heavily taxing the people who have more than they need. Like America's most prosperous times was when our tax rate on the extremely rich was somewhere between 70 and 90% before Reagan cut down on taxes. They cut down their taxes. And even Reagan raised the tax rate again after he realized the damage that cutting taxes as much as he did has done. Like I don't know that I could narrow it down to a very specific definition. It's more for me like the parts that sum up to the whole.
Sure.
I'm not a theory-driven socialist. I'm not one of these people that like quotes Marx every day. I just like the bare bones.
Gotcha. Yeah, so for me, I think I would largely agree with all of that. I just don't know if I would call that socialism.
Socialism still has markets, it still has cooperative ownership, it's got all of that. The next step where it removes money and commodities is communism. I'm not doing that.
Gotcha. Well, so the rain is getting a lot louder, so we might want to call it. But it's been a good chat.
I got to pump up Amy's tires before she goes to work anyway. I look forward to talking to you again. It was fun. And I like that we got to run more tthan an hour. With Carson, we always had to cut it back to an hour.
Yeah, I'm down to go as pretty long. So, but yeah, let's. It was a good chat. Good having you. Hopefully, we'll have you again.
Yeah. Hopefully soon.
Yeah, all right. Well, we'll see you, man.
I'll see you around.
Yep. All right. Bye, guys.